You see, one of the most mysterious yet misunderstood subjects in the spiritual world is the question, can jinn enter human bodies? People laugh about it, others fear it, but very few understand it. This is not superstition, this is spiritual reality. The unseen world is more organized, more structured, and more intentional than most humans realize. The spiritual world is older than us, wiser than us, and far more strategic. So yes, when we talk about jinn entering the human body, we're not talking about fantasy, we're talking about infiltration, invasion, and spiritual occupation. When you ask, can a jinn enter a human body? The answer is yes, but not without permission. Every spiritual being functions under divine law. No demon, no jinn can simply invade your life without a gate. They need access, they need an opening. That's why Scripture keeps talking about giving no place to darkness. Because if there's a place, there's an invitation. The human body is not just flesh and bone, it is a gate system. Your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your heart, these are spiritual gateways. Every thought that enters your mind, every emotion that takes root in your heart, every word that leaves your lips, these are portals that open or close doors in the spirit. You were designed as an interface between two realms, the visible and the invisible. That's why jinn target you. They want what you have access. Let me show you something profound. Jinn do not just jump into a person, they are drawn by spiritual conditions. Sin, fear, and rebellion are like fragrances in the spirit. When a person walks in bitterness, when they hold unforgiveness, when they indulge in lust, they emit a frequency that attracts the unclean. The jinn don't just see your body, they see your spiritual atmosphere. They can smell disobedience like perfume. And the moment they identify an open gate, they move in silently. Some of you wonder why your life feels heavy, why your dreams are full of chaos, why your emotions swing between peace and torment. It's because something entered through a door you didn't close, maybe through pornography, maybe through an argument that turned into hatred, maybe through music that carried dark vibrations, maybe through fear that grew into obsession. Every gate must be guarded. Fear is one of the greatest doors. When fear dominates your soul, you unconsciously surrender authority. Fear tells the unseen realm, I don't believe in the protection of the divine. And that declaration gives permission for spiritual trespass. Jinn thrive in fear because fear creates energy, negative faith that empowers them. But it doesn't stop there. Trauma also opens gates. When someone experiences abuse, betrayal, or emotional wounds, those experiences create cracks in the soul. If healing doesn't come through forgiveness and prayer, those cracks become open portals. Spirits of oppression, depression, and confusion move in through unhealed pain. You think you're just struggling emotionally, but your spirit is under invasion. Even disobedience is a key. The moment you step outside divine boundaries, you step into foreign territory. Rebellion attracts rebellion. Darkness recognizes its own. When a person persistently walks in sin, jinn find legal ground. They don't just visit, they settle. They begin to influence thoughts, distort emotions, and manipulate behavior. That's why some people suddenly develop uncontrollable anger, addictions, or voices in their head. They've lost ownership of their gates. Now listen carefully. Possession doesn't always mean full control. Sometimes it's oppression. Sometimes it's influence, sometimes it's partial occupation. A jinn can occupy a room without owning the whole house. But if the owner never reclaims it, the intruder will expand its territory. That's why spiritual awareness is not optional, it's essential. You must know the state of your own gates. When you live carelessly, you live vulnerably. Every moment without prayer is an unlocked door. Every argument without forgiveness is an unguarded window. Every thought without discernment is an open portal. Jinn don't need an invitation written in blood, they just need negligence. So what's the key? Guard your gates. Be conscious of what enters through your senses. Watch your atmosphere, your habits, your words. Because once an unclean spirit enters, it doesn't leave by politeness, it leaves by power. It leaves when authority reclaims what negligence surrendered. And that's why spiritual strength begins with spiritual discipline. The battle is not out there, it's in your gates. Every thought you reject that doesn't align with divine truth closes a door. Every moment you choose faith over fear locks another one. Every time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, you reinforce your fortress. You cannot stop jinn from roaming, but you can stop them from entering. Your body is sacred territory. Don't let it become a lodging place for what was never meant to dwell in it. Keep your gates shut, your spirit alert, and your atmosphere clean. Because the moment you guard your gates, the enemy loses his entry. Every jinn that enters a human body does not do so randomly. It requires a legal right. You see, the spiritual world is governed by divine law just as surely as the natural world is governed by physical law. Gravity keeps you on the ground, but spiritual law governs access and authority in the unseen realm. Nothing in that realm happens by accident. Every manifestation, every oppression, every possession, there's always a cause, a doorway, a permission. Spirits cannot just walk into your life. They need an invitation. And that invitation may not always come in the form of words. It may come through attitude, through lifestyle, through alignment. Understand this: the jinn cannot violate divine order. They can only exploit human ignorance. When a person violates spiritual principles, they unknowingly sign a contract in the unseen. Every disobedience, every compromise, every unguarded moment creates a small opening, and that opening becomes a legal claim for a jinn to operate. That's why the scriptures emphasize righteousness. It's not about religion, it's about protection. Obedience keeps your spiritual borders intact. Disobedience weakens them. A jinn looks for legality because the unseen realm functions on the basis of authority and right. That's why even in exorcisms or deliverance, they often respond with statements like, "I have a right to be here." That's not random, it's law. They claim ground based on what was given to them. Maybe it was a sin unrepented, a vow spoken carelessly, a generational curse unbroken, or an object consecrated unknowingly to darkness. Each of these becomes a legal document in the realm of spirits. And once a right has been granted, they exercise authority until that right is revoked. Some people think it's just about rituals or words, but deliverance is about breaking contracts. You can shout and command all day, but if the legal right remains, the jinn will not leave. Authority without alignment is powerless. It's like trying to evict someone when you're not the rightful owner of the property. They'll just wait until your words lose force. But when you realign yourself under divine authority, every illegal occupant must go. Now let's go deeper into what creates these legal rights. One of the most common causes is unconfessed sin. When a person indulges in sin and never repents, it becomes a landing strip for spiritual entities. Sin produces darkness, and darkness attracts what dwells in it. It's not that the jinn are stronger than you, it's that your rebellion gives them a reason to stay. They dwell where the divine presence has been ignored. Another gateway is covenant. Many people are bound not because of what they did, but because of what was done before them. Family covenants, bloodline rituals, ancestral dedications, these are legal documents in the spirit. A grandfather might have made an agreement with an unseen being for wealth, protection, or power, and generations later that covenant still speaks, giving the jinn legal access to the descendants. That's why sometimes you see patterns, cycles of depression, poverty, premature death, or insanity. It's not coincidence, it's continuity of an ancient contract. The only way to break that is by establishing a higher covenant, one rooted in divine authority. There are also rights created through words. You must understand that speech is not just communication, it is legislation. When you speak, you are not merely expressing, you are authorizing. Every careless word can become a legal key in the unseen realm. When you say things like, "I'll never be free," or "I feel cursed," or "I wish I were dead," you're not just venting, you're signing declarations. Jinn take words seriously because words are contracts. That's why silence is often more powerful than foolish speech. You cannot cast out what your mouth keeps inviting. Even emotional conditions can grant rights. Prolonged anger, hatred, jealousy, bitterness, these are not just emotions, they are spiritual energies. When they dominate your inner world, they create a compatible atmosphere for dark spirits. The jinn are drawn to environments that match their nature. So if a person lives in bitterness, they attract spirits of torment. If they live in lust, they attract spirits of impurity. The principle is simple: what you host emotionally, you attract spiritually. You also need to understand that objects and spaces can carry legal rights. When you bring items that were dedicated to other spirits, amulets, talismans, charms, occult symbols, you are not just bringing decoration into your home, you are bringing representation. Those objects become physical anchors for spiritual presence. That's why certain homes feel heavy. It's not psychological, it's legal. You've invited a presence through possession. And there are even rights created through ignorance. When people play with spiritual things they don't understand, like invoking unknown names, chanting without knowledge, consulting fortune tellers, or practicing harmless rituals, they open doors by curiosity. The unseen realm doesn't excuse ignorance. Ignorance doesn't protect you. It exposes you. That's why discernment is crucial. You cannot manage what you do not understand. So when we talk about the entry of jinn into human bodies, we're not talking about random invasion, we're talking about lawful occupation. They wait for an invitation, they claim a right, and once they find one, they move in legally. And until that legality is broken through repentance, cleansing and realignment, the invasion continues. You cannot fight a legal case with emotion, you fight it with authority and evidence. The evidence is your obedience, your purity, your covenant alignment. When you walk uprightly, you remove their claim. When you repent, you erase their document. When you speak divine truth, you override their decrees. That is the true foundation of deliverance, not just power, but legality. Because in the spiritual realm, order governs all things. Darkness may roar, but it cannot violate law. Once you reclaim your legal position, every unclean spirit must withdraw. The moment you restore divine order in your life, the invasion ends. There are always signs when the unseen begins to invade the seen. Nothing in the spiritual realm happens silently forever. When a jinn enters or begins to influence a person, it leaves evident spiritual fingerprints that manifest through emotion, behavior, and even the body itself. The tragedy is that many people mistake these signs for ordinary problems. They treat the symptom while ignoring the source. You cannot medicate a spiritual problem with physical solutions. You cannot counsel a demon, you cast it out. And you cannot fix a possession problem with positive thinking. There must be discernment, because discernment exposes what deception hides. You see, the human body and soul are designed to host the Spirit of God, not the spirit of darkness. So when a foreign presence enters, conflict begins. The body becomes restless. The mind becomes unstable. The emotions become unpredictable. It's like a house that has two landlords fighting over ownership. You can feel the tension even when you can't see the fight. The individual begins to feel like something is wrong within them, but can't explain it. That's because their inner atmosphere has changed. A presence has entered that does not belong. One of the first signs is resistance to anything spiritual. The person may suddenly find it difficult to pray, to read scripture, to worship, or to even stay in places filled with spiritual light. They get irritated by holy words, uncomfortable around people who carry divine presence, or restless in sacred environments. It's not that they don't want to be there, it's that the spirit inside them doesn't. Darkness cannot stand light. When the Spirit of truth is present, every false spirit reacts. That's why you'll often see people suddenly yawn excessively, feel dizzy, angry, or distracted during prayer. It's not coincidence, it's reaction. Another sign is mental and emotional instability. The person begins to hear intrusive thoughts, experience inner voices, or wrestle with overwhelming emotions that don't match their personality. One moment they are calm, the next they are filled with rage. One day they are full of hope, the next they are drowning in despair. The jinn manipulates emotion because emotion fuels the spirit realm. When you are angry, you release energy. When you are fearful, you weaken authority. That's why these spirits feed on emotional chaos. They keep the person oscillating between extremes to keep them spiritually exhausted. There are also physical signs. The body reacts to what it hosts. People under spiritual oppression often experience strange pains, heaviness, sleep paralysis, or sensations of something crawling on their skin. or pressing on their chest at night. Some wake up with bruises or scratches without remembering how they got there. Others feel drained even after rest, as if something is feeding on their strength. The human body is sensitive, it records spiritual activity. When darkness resides within, the physical temple shows distress. Dreams are another major indicator. The dream world is a window into the unseen. People under Jinn influence often experience nightmares filled with serpents, dark figures, sexual encounters, or shadowy beings chasing them. They may even see themselves being fed, attacked, or bound in their dreams. That's not the imagination, it's an encounter. Dreams reveal battles fought in the spirit realm. Sometimes what you see in your dreams is what is feeding off your life while you sleep. Behavioral changes are also powerful clues. When a Jinn has influence, you will see sudden shifts in personality. A once loving person becomes cruel. A gentle person becomes violent. A moral person becomes shameless. Addictions appear from nowhere: alcohol, drugs, pornography, or gambling, because the spirit within seeks to satisfy its nature through human flesh. Remember, Jinn have desires but no bodies, so they borrow yours to express what they crave. Every addiction has a spiritual component behind it. When the craving becomes uncontrollable, it's not just flesh, it's influence. Isolation is another common symptom. The individual begins to withdraw from family, from friends, from community. They prefer darkness over light, silence over company, secrecy over openness. The spirit's goal is to cut them off from voices that can bring deliverance. Once isolation is achieved, manipulation deepens. You start believing lies. Nobody understands you. You're beyond help. You deserve this. The Jinn whispers these thoughts until the person's identity begins to erode. Even the eyes can reveal it. There are moments when you look into someone's eyes and something looks back that's not them. A heaviness, a coldness, an emptiness. Because the eyes are the windows of the soul, and when the soul is overshadowed, the eyes lose their light. The tone of voice changes, the posture shifts, and sometimes even the facial expression distorts under certain spiritual conditions. It's important to note that not every illness, depression, or emotional battle is caused by Jinn. But when the natural explanation no longer fits, when medication doesn't heal, when counseling doesn't help, when the patterns become supernatural, then you must look deeper. The unseen often hides behind the unexplained. Recognizing these signs is not to create fear, but to awaken awareness. Awareness leads to authority. Once you discern the presence of the unclean, you can confront it. Because what you can identify, you can evict. The problem is never that people are powerless, it's that they are unaware. You cannot fight what you refuse to acknowledge. Every sign, every symptom is a signal calling you to spiritual attention. It's heaven's way of saying, check your gates. When something doesn't feel right within, don't ignore it. When peace leaves, don't normalize it. When you sense heaviness, don't accept it as fate. Discernment is protection. If you don't recognize what's wrong, you'll learn to live with what should have been cast out. There are certain places and objects that seem to carry a spiritual weight and atmosphere that either welcomes or repels unseen forces. Every environment holds energy, and every energy attracts its own kind. You can walk into one room and feel peace, while another room feels thick and heavy, even though both look perfectly normal. That's because the unseen realm operates by spiritual laws of attraction. Darkness dwells where it is invited, and Jinn, being spirits, are drawn to places and objects that match their vibration. They do not just wander randomly, they settle where the atmosphere accommodates them. Many people underestimate how much their environment influences their spiritual life. You can fast, you can pray, but if your surroundings are charged with the wrong presence, your spirit will still wrestle unnecessarily. Jinn are territorial beings. They like to claim space. They attach themselves to locations, buildings, objects, and even land where certain activities occur. And once that territory is saturated with their influence, it becomes a magnet for more of their kind. Certain environments, especially those where violence, immorality, fear, or death are constant, become spiritual magnets. You can sense it. Abandoned buildings, graveyards, hotels, clubs, certain music studios, Even houses where constant arguments and abuse happen, all of these are breeding grounds for dark energy. Because jinn thrive in disorder. Wherever divine order is broken, darkness multiplies. It's not the building itself, it's the spiritual climate created by human behavior. You see, the physical environment mirrors the spiritual atmosphere. If chaos fills the room, something spiritual is feeding on it. Now let's go deeper. Jinn are drawn to energy. Every sound, every word, every emotion releases energy into an environment. When people curse, fight, lie, gossip, or engage in lustful acts, they are releasing frequencies that attract unclean spirits. That's why some homes feel tense all the time. You can clean the furniture but still feel dirty inside the walls. Because what pollutes the spirit of a place is not dust, it's behavior. Your atmosphere is the echo of your actions. Objects can also carry spiritual signatures. Every item has a history, and every history carries residue. A ring, a painting, a statue, a piece of jewelry, or a souvenir from a foreign land, these may seem innocent, but some are consecrated to unseen powers. When you bring such an object into your home, you are not just adding decoration, you are adding a spiritual doorway. Jinn can attach themselves to material things because matter holds memory. If that object was ever used in occult rituals, witchcraft, idol worship, or blood sacrifices, it carries a mark. And when placed in your environment, that mark signals to the unseen realm that this ground is open for visitation. People often wonder why strange things begin to happen after bringing certain gifts, antiques, or artifacts into their home. The atmosphere changes, nightmares increase, arguments intensify, shadows appear. It's because you didn't just bring an object, you brought a spirit's anchor. The item became a point of contact for dark presence. Spirits need legal ground to dwell, and objects provide that when tied to past spiritual activity. That's why discernment must be applied to what you bring near your soul space. Even music and imagery play a powerful role. Sound and sight are gateways. When you fill your home with songs that glorify darkness, rebellion, or immorality, you are not just entertaining yourself, you are hosting energy. Jinn thrive in frequencies of perversion because sound travels faster than thought. The melodies you play create vibrations that alter the atmosphere. That's why worship music brings peace, it aligns frequencies with heaven. And that's why dark music stirs chaos, it aligns with hell. Your home can be either a sanctuary or a spiritual battlefield, depending on the atmosphere you create. Another environment that attracts jinn is one filled with neglect or decay. Remember, in the natural world, pests thrive where there's dirt. In the spiritual world, jinn thrive where there's disorder. A cluttered home, unkempt rooms, stagnant corners, these are not just physical conditions, they are spiritual signals. Darkness loves neglect. When you stop caring for your space, you unconsciously create a home for unclean energy. The same is true of your body and mind. When you let neglect take over, you invite decay. But there's something even deeper: emotional atmosphere. Some houses are filled with fear, others with grief, others with anger. These emotional states hang in the air like invisible smoke. The moment you enter, you feel it. That's why jinn can stay where trauma happened, where abuse lingers, where sorrow has not been healed. They feed on emotional residue, using it as fuel. The house remembers the pain, and as long as that pain is not cleansed, the darkness stays. It's the same with certain geographical territories. There are regions in the world where ancient blood has been spilled, where idols were worshipped for centuries, where rituals were performed for generations. Those lands carry stronghold spiritual contracts written into the soil. Jinn dwell in such places because history has consecrated them. That's why certain nations, cities, or neighborhoods feel more spiritually heavy than others. It's not random, it's residue. You must understand, the spiritual and the physical coexist. What happens in one influences the other. If you want peace, you must create an environment that welcomes peace. If you want light, you must fill your space with light. Burn incense of prayer, not incense of fear. Fill your room with gratitude, not gossip, because every action releases either fragrance or filth into your atmosphere. It's not enough to pray occasionally while living in polluted environments. You must guard your space as much as you guard your soul. Keep your home pure, your energy clean, and your environment disciplined. Remove anything that carries a presence not aligned with divine order. Speak life into your home. Clean both physically and spiritually. Because where order is restored, peace will reign, and where peace reigns, darkness cannot dwell. Words are not just sounds, they are spiritual instruments. Every time you open your mouth, you activate laws that govern the invisible realm. Speech is not mere communication, it is creation. What you speak gives permission, what you declare gives access, and what you repeat becomes law in the unseen. That is why Jinn, like all spiritual beings, respond to words. They don't move because you think, they move because you speak. The realm of spirits is governed by authority, and authority is expressed through language. Every word you say carries either authorization or cancellation. When a person speaks carelessly, they open doors they don't realize exist. Words such as, I feel cursed, I'll never be free, I'm dying, or I'm losing my mind, are not just emotional statements, they are spiritual decrees. In the invisible world, there's no such thing as a joke. Your words become agreements, and agreements become access points. The Jinn are legalistic. They wait for your permission disguised as emotion. The moment you declare something that aligns with their purpose, they act on it. They don't need you to summon them with rituals. Your speech alone can summon them through belief. The universe responds to sound because sound carries power. Even creation itself began with words. Light didn't appear until it was spoken. That means nothing changes until something is said. So if divine power is released through speech, demonic power can also be activated through speech that contradicts divine truth. Every negative declaration weakens your spiritual boundaries, while every word of truth reinforces them. Jinn understand this principle better than humans. That's why they constantly whisper lies to make you repeat them. They know that once you speak it, you own it. Think about it, most spiritual battles begin in conversation. Eve didn't fall through a sword, she fell through speech. The serpent didn't fight her physically, it engaged her through words. Because once your mind believes and your mouth agrees, your spirit yields. That's how legal access is created. Spirits manipulate language because they know it shapes reality. They don't need to overpower you, they just need you to speak against yourself. And the moment your words align with their will, they take authority in your atmosphere. This is why in times of fear or pain, your words matter most. When you are under attack, when you feel overwhelmed, when your mind is under pressure, watch what you say. Because words spoken in pain often become invitations. The Jinn love broken speech. When you say things like, I can't do this anymore, I feel empty, something's controlling me. You are not just describing your state, you are defining it. And once defined, it takes form. Even silence can be powerful if it's intentional. But silence born out of fear gives power to oppression. When you stop speaking truth, you give lies permission to echo. That's why spiritual warfare is often vocal. You overcome by declaring, not by thinking. When you decree truth, you override deception. When you confess peace, you dismantle torment. When you declare light, darkness loses ground. Words are your spiritual weapons, they cut through the unseen like fire. But notice how the enemy tries to pervert this principle. Music filled with profanity, movies filled with curses, jokes that glorify evil, all of these are ways to normalize destructive language. You consume words daily, and those words program your subconscious. The Jinn use this as infiltration. They attach themselves to phrases and patterns that align with their vibration. You begin to speak their language without realizing it. That's why some people curse habitually. They're not just speaking words, they're releasing energy that calls the same spirits that created those words. When you understand the power of your speech, you'll begin to guard your mouth like a gate. You'll realize that every argument, every conversation, every whisper is an opportunity to build or to break. When you speak with anger, you license the spirit of anger. When you speak with jealousy, you invite envy. When you speak with gratitude, you attract peace. Speech creates atmosphere, atmosphere creates habitation. The words you repeat most often decide which spirit feels comfortable in your environment. Even prayers can be misused if the heart behind them is wrong. You can pray fearfully and still invite fear. You can pray doubtfully and still strengthen unbelief. It's not just what you say, it's what power you align with as you speak. True authority in words comes from alignment with truth. When your heart, your mind, and your spirit agree with divine order, your words carry weight. Jinn cannot resist speech that is rooted in divine law because it burns through deception. But speech that is careless becomes a playground for manipulation. You must understand that the tongue is a steering wheel of destiny. It can turn your life toward freedom or bondage. If you speak constantly about pain, you extend it. If you speak constantly about defeat, you reinforce it. But when you begin to declare authority, peace, light, and purity, you shift your vibration. The jinn cannot dwell where the frequency of truth is dominant. That's why confession is cleansing. It resets the spiritual frequency around you. Guard your mouth because your words build the walls around your soul. Every statement either fortifies or weakens your protection. Choose to speak what aligns with light. Choose to declare life when everything around you screams death. Because the moment you take control of your speech, you take control of your atmosphere, and the enemy loses the right to dwell within your gates. Emotional wounds are not just memories, they are openings. Every hurt, betrayal, rejection, or trauma leaves more than a scar on the heart, it leaves a space. And if that space is never healed, it becomes a doorway. People often believe their past pain is only psychological, but in the unseen realm, pain has a presence. Wounds unhealed become gates unguarded. They don't just stay buried inside, they broadcast a frequency, and that frequency attracts spirits that feed on it. That is why unresolved trauma is one of the most powerful entry points for jinn. When a person experiences deep pain, their soul becomes tender. In that state, they are searching for relief, for anything that promises to numb the ache. But pain doesn't only attract comfort, it also attracts predators. Spirits of oppression, depression, and confusion recognize the scent of unhealed wounds. They hover around it, waiting for the right moment to step in. They don't force their way, they feed off the energy of that pain until they blend with it. Soon, what began as emotional injury becomes spiritual bondage. This is why some people cannot break cycles of anger, addiction, or despair. They are not weak, they are wounded. And their wounds have become entry points. If you look closely, you will see patterns. A person abused as a child grows up battling lust or shame. Someone betrayed repeatedly grows bitter and isolated. Another who lived through rejection now struggles with self-hatred. These are not coincidences, they are consequences of open doors. Unhealed pain calls for healing, but if healing is delayed, darkness answers instead. The enemy understands this principle far better than most people. He doesn't always strike in adulthood, he plants seeds in childhood. A word spoken by a parent, a moment of abuse, a season of rejection, these become cracks in the soul. And if no one teaches that child how to heal, those cracks widen into gateways as they grow older. That's why so many adults are fighting invisible battles rooted in childhood wounds. They are not just struggling with habits, they are fighting spirits that entered through brokenness decades ago. Unforgiveness is one of the strongest doorways created by emotional wounds. When someone hurts you deeply and you refuse to forgive, you don't imprison them, you imprison yourself. Bitterness becomes a cage, and inside that cage, spirits of resentment, anger, and torment feel right at home. They thrive where forgiveness is absent. The moment you choose to forgive, the lock breaks and the cage opens. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is eviction. It denies the enemy a home built from pain. Shame is another powerful wound. Shame tells you that you are what you went through, that you are what was done to you. It distorts your identity and keeps you in secrecy. Jinn love secrecy because light exposes them. As long as shame keeps you silent, they remain undetected. But the moment you expose the wound to truth and healing, their grip begins to loosen. This is why healing is not just about comfort, it's about reclaiming territory. Every healed wound closes a door. Even grief, if left unresolved, can become a gateway. Loss creates a vacuum in the soul, and if that vacuum is not filled with peace, it becomes filled with torment. Some people lose a loved one and Instead of healing, they open themselves to voices, apparitions, or rituals in the name of connection. Without realizing it, they invite spirits masquerading as comforters. What began as longing becomes a legal invitation for deception. But here's the good news: just as wounds can open doors, healing can close them. The soul is resilient. Every time you confront your pain, every time you forgive, every time you release bitterness, every time you speak truth over shame, you are shutting gates one by one. That's why true deliverance must address the heart, not just the spirit. You cannot cast out what a wound is still inviting. You must heal the wound and remove the welcome mat. Healing is not instant, it's intentional. It begins with honesty, admitting the pain instead of burying it. It continues with release, choosing forgiveness over revenge, peace over anger. And it ends with realignment, allowing your soul to reconnect with divine truth about who you are. When that happens, the frequency of your spirit changes. You no longer attract torment, you attract peace. You no longer echo pain, you echo strength. Jinn are opportunists. They don't create your wounds, they exploit them. But once you understand that your emotional state is not just mental but spiritual territory, you begin to treat your healing as warfare. Every time you choose to confront rather than conceal, to forgive rather than resent, to release rather than retain, you are not just healing, you are closing a gate.